Hello and welcome to Talk to Downtown. My name is Courtney Wood. I'm the Economic Development Director for the Downtown Stockton Alliance, the 501c6 nonprofit property-based business improvement district serving downtown Stockton. This series is intended to connect our business owners, property owners, visitors, and residents with the organizations, people, and resources which impact our community. Today we have a special guest, Paula Sheil. She is the president of Tuleburg Press, our local publisher. We'll begin by having Paula share a little bit about her background and how it led her to working with Tuleburg Press. Then I will go ahead and ask her a list of questions I've outlined for her, and at the end, we will open it up for viewers to go ahead and ask your questions. So if you do have a question, type it in as a comment, and we will get to it towards the end of the live. Also, we're doing something special today. We have 2 copies of the brand new poetry anthology released by Tuleburg Press, published by Tuleburg Press, available as a giveaway. So anyone who does type in a question as a comment, you'll be automatically entered in a chance to win a free copy. So welcome everybody. Welcome Paula. Really excited to have you on today. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got connected to working at Tuleburg Press.
Great. Well, I made my debut in Stockton as a 17-year-old in 1971 to attend the University of Pacific, specifically to attend Raymond College, which was one of the experimental cluster colleges patterned after Oxford. I recently did a eulogy for my faculty advisor, John Williams, who passed, and I had the opportunity to read through all of my college material. We went to a non-graded school and we had to have term letters instead of grades. So I read the text of those and I realized that everything I am today really was developed during my undergraduate years, because I was a humanities or liberal arts major studying education, but I did more independent studies than I even recalled. And that is the nexus of being a project manager and a project developer. And that's pretty much the way I have spent my life in Stockton. The other thing that was connected to my undergraduate experience was our first year, we were sent out into the community as aides or interns in all kinds of fields. And I spent my first semester at Martin Luther King Elementary School. So I crossed the Great Divide in Stockton, the DMZ that separated whites from blacks, from the haves and the have-nots, and that still plagues us today. And I never thought of Stockton as a divided city. It's always been my home, and I have crossed it north, south, east, west, doing the kinds of things I've done my whole life. And ultimately, my career spanned education, arts advocacy, journalism, and then back to education. So that's where I am today, combining all those threads, but all of it was really grounded in the fabulous education I received at Raymond College.
Wow, such an interesting foundation and kind of the way it's built you and led you to what you're doing today. I love that. So can we talk now a little bit about Tuleburg Press as an organization?
Sure.
So tell us, yeah.
So the first step along the way was just the attitude that if something needed to be done, you could do it. And if you didn't know how to do it, you could basically turn up the resources and find out and enlist supporters. And this is before Google. So basically you surround yourself with the kinds of people that you want to emulate, and you work in a collaborative fashion versus a competitive fashion. That's always been the way things worked for me. So I started Stockton Civic Children's Theater back in 1978, and that's a going program today at Stockton Civic Theater. And then I started and developed several other things. The next one that's most relevant was a poetry publication called Zambamba, and that was we printed 7,000 copies of that 4 times a year from 1995 to 2000. So ultimately, what happened with Tuleburg was I had a faculty member who came to me, and I was sitting on a committee that had a fund to do literacy development or literary projects. And he had lost his first publisher, was a small press, and he said, would you help me with some funds to publish my second book? And I said, no, let's start a publishing company. So
Yeah.
basically, I said, and I'll use this process to learn how to do it. And that was Phil Hutchins' first book with me called Desperation Passes. And it was a novel, and the subject matter was the exploitation of Black athletes by a fictional CSU system. So that was how we cut our teeth in 2012 with his book. We developed the nonprofit, got the 501c3 status, and I'm going to say, a dozen books in now. In 2017, we opened The Right Place. And because our mission, the mission of Tuleburg Press, is to publish us, to, in my own mind, to find the next Leonard Gardner, to find the next Maxine Hong Kingston, to provide an opportunity for people to express themselves in multiple genres and to see themselves in print, and for us to have publications where we can read ourselves, where we can read about things that matter to us in our community. So our mission is to find, mentor, and publish local writers who write about everything Stockton, San Joaquin. Some people wonder why we branched into The Right Place, but that was where we could create a space for that to happen, and we could work with children, and we could do everything book, because I've always been a writer, and knowing how to make paper, how to make ink, how to bind a book, the anatomy of the book was so interesting and I had taken classes in San Francisco, and the whole idea was to bring all that back to Stockton, to have a place that was everything book. And that's why we have both the publishing and the place where writers can gather and create.
I love that. So it's all about hearing local stories, hearing from local creatives, and learning about kind of publishing and creating books, everything involved in the process. I mean, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful to have that.
It's so much work.
It sounds like it is. But it's needed. We need it. And I know that, language, reading, literacy, that's such an important piece for anyone kind of growing up in our society. So you guys do a lot of work around literacy as well. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of how you're able to help promote literacy in our community?
There's no one approach, and that there are many organizations working on the problem. It's just like homelessness. You identify it and then you chip away at it, and some things work and some things don't. Just having the right place is a marker. Just having a local publishing company is a marker, just the way magazines, newspapers, subscriptions, numbers of bookstores, libraries, all those things are tallied in the literacy component of a community. I think one of our biggest hits in terms of really making a dent is having Orlando Molina as part of our team. He is a local author, transplant from Brooklyn, New York, and he's a hip hop artist, but he is focused on children. He has toddlers of his own, and he has written a series of books called Rhinosaurs. We have helped him with one of those publications because he was already, printing. He was already publishing when he came to Stockton, and we met him. But he is our writer in residence, and his approach to working with kids with hip hop and using rhymes to engage them and to have them speak their raps as they progress really engages them. It's no different from writing and reading out loud, but hip hop is so pervasive in our community, and with kids it crosses so many ethnic lines. And so the kids who normally aren't interested in reading and writing are more willing to go along with Orlando and his workshops. And I think promoting him and maintaining him as a staff member and keeping him in the community in any way that we can. He's very active himself, but helping him is probably one of the best ways that we are engaging young people. As far as adults, we have some really interesting success stories, and it might come up later of how people have been engaged. But one of the things I just started the other night was a memoir writing class. And the way to affect literacy is basically just to encourage people to write. People feel like they have a book in them and they want to know how it happens. And there's no magic dust. It's really just sit down and write, and then anything can be edited. But you have to just encourage people to do it. And I think the process of writing overall in public education is you write something and you get graded on it. So as you write, if you're awarded an A, you feel good. But if you're getting less than that, your writing starts to feel like it doesn't matter and it can't be improved. And it's such a personal thing. It comes out of you. And we're basically telling people that you're a C as a person with self-expression, or you're an F. And once you're doing that, I mean, writing then becomes something that is really, it's almost as tragic as like math anxiety. If people don't feel good about their self-expression and it's graded, that's what's different about Tuleburg, is that, you know, it's a place that's safe to experience expressing yourself. But anyway, I'll try not to answer all the questions at once.
No, I love it. And you said you did have a couple of stories that you could share maybe about how literacy can impact someone's life. And I think I would love to hear those. If you have one or two you might be able to share. But you're right. It can be, if someone is always telling you, you're getting an F on this assignment, then how motivated are you to write on your own for anything?
Right.
Oh, I'm not, maybe I'm not good at it.
Your questions might be a little bit out of order by doing this, but one of the most significant experiences that I have been able to share with a writer has been the publication of our book, Wolfhound. It's called My Spiritual Walk as a Wolfhound, a Grunt in Vietnam. We have a project called Pieces to Peace, and it's PIECES to PEACE. So pieces, we cut up a garment of significance. In his case, when I work with veterans, this was a towel that he wore over his shoulder during his Vietnam deployment, and it kept the ammo belt from cutting into his shoulder. He brought that to us and he cut it up and he made paper out of it and created a journal. And then he experienced 6 months of writing workshops with Professor Amy Smith, who was working with us on that project, and was very reticent and very quiet in that whole process. He had already started writing down his experiences in Vietnam as a 19-year-old. And he wasn't intending to write a book. What he was trying to do was explain to his children why he was such a terrible father. And that was the burden he carried, because he came back from Vietnam a deflated and despised soldier, and emotionally detached, unable to really be there for his kids. If it weren't for his wife, he might not be here today. So he had the family support. Jessica always talks about how she basically allowed him the space to be. And once this manuscript came to light, and basically he did it by talking into the phone and then having it, Dragon software, dictate it into the computer. And I mean, he had a manuscript, a couple hundred pages.
Oh my God.
And to make a long story somewhat shorter, he was so terrified that the book would not be well received, that what if people hate my book? And those first couple of months just before publication were really nerve-wracking for him. Once the book came out, and it's been out for now, it'll be 2 years this coming Veterans Day, and we've sold almost 1,000 copies of that book. And it's been very well received, but what it has done for him is amazing. It has changed his life. It has been more effective than any other post-traumatic stress disorder treatment he has received since he came home from the war in 1970. He is able to speak about his experience. He's a public speaker now. He's able to talk about emotional things and describe their impact on his family. He accepts all kinds of public appearances this time. He's a native Ute Indian, so he is involved in all kinds of tribal activities and does all kinds of blessings for all kinds of events like the opening of the new Veterans Center, etc. But I mean, he and his wife and I, we express our love for each other every time we see each other, because it has changed his life, and we are companions now on this journey. And if I could, just the fact that I am here today, having able to change one Vietnam veteran's life, having lived through the Vietnam War myself as an anti-war protester. This is one of the most significant things I think we've been able to do. And maybe you can't move the whole mountain, but one person, his story is significant. His name is Joseph Mays, and the book is My Spiritual Walk as a Wolfhound, a Grunt in Vietnam. It's available on Amazon. But I know that even for some people who just see their poems now in the anthology, there's a sense of uplifting, and that we're all being uplifted together as a poetic community. So may all not be at the same magnitude, and this man is essentially illiterate. I mean, not in the sense he was never college educated, and his writing is just like he was when he was 19. So you don't have to be an academic writer or, a New York Times bestseller list writer to actually achieve some benefit from this, but it has changed this man.
That's amazing to kind of have the opportunity to tell his story, share his experiences, and then it can touch others who are reading it. And it can also motivate others to feel confident, like, oh, like I could share my story too. That's super interesting. That is so powerful. How beautiful. That is really beautiful. And so your guys' focus is to publish works by local authors.
Right.
Are the works, it sounds like to me then that sometimes the works are about Stockton, but sometimes it's just about the lives of people who live here now. What other types of works have you seen come through Tuleburg Press?
Well,
and what types of authors?
The Stockton tie or the San Joaquin tie has to be there. So I'll give you an example. If someone submits during this process now a great murder mystery that takes place in Elko, Nevada, I would not be interested. I just, good for you. If it took place in Stockton, yes. And it doesn't have to just be the locale. Now Joseph Mays was from Stockton. So obviously as he's writing it, he's writing about being in Vietnam, but the whole process of going to high school here and being drafted and everything, it's set in Stockton. The kinds of books we've published, the first one really didn't have anything to do with Stockton at all. It had to do with a fictional California State University system and Black athletes and how they're treated, educated, or not educated and exploited for their athletic talents. That was close enough to like what we experienced both at Delta and in our university systems with athletes, that it fit. It was okay for me. The second book was a poetry anthology of David Walden's works. He was a prolific contributor to columnist Mike Fitzgerald's 55-word contest. And he would submit every year. He would probably have one every year if Mike didn't try to make it fairer for other participants. But I published 100 of his poems in a book called 55 and Counting, because every poem has to be exactly 55 words. And his poems, he has a whole chapter on Stockton poems, the fog, the heat, all those kinds of things that we all can relate to. But then he has other poems about politics, and he was a very liberal, he's passed away now, but a very liberal political thinker. So he had always taking pot shots at the government or etc. But he also suffered a debilitating illness and died from it. And so there's quite a bit about his medical and his physical deterioration and his medical, association with the medical machine. So the book, it has that Stockton connection. I'll give you another example. We published a book, a children's book, a picture book, and the story takes place in a woman's yard in up by Elkhorn Golf Club. Basically, this woman experienced a goose landing in her oak tree and standing on a limb, and when you think of geese, they're on the ground, they're in the water. So the fact that this flat-footed goose was standing in an oak tree was really unusual. That turned into a story about going out on a limb and being true to yourself, because later, the next year, I guess this goose came back and it had its fledglings with it and its spouse. And so there were more geese in the tree. And the whole book was just a little story about, basically do what you need to do for yourself and others will follow you if you're, if basically you're expressing yourself and your intention is good. So that doesn't even say Stockton in it, but it's a Stockton story. So those are the kinds of things. Then I'll say two more.
Yeah.
This is a real thing for me, having been in journalism and very much supportive of Stockton and interested in Stockton's history. And in history in general, I really decry the lack of institutional knowledge. When people leave an organization, they leave big holes and big gaps in people's understanding of where we've come from, which really helps us understand how to get where we're going. And so two books about Stockton history that I published, one of them by Mary Jo Golke, which is about the Philomathian Club. It's not what you would call a page turner, but it is information that is now accessible to the public about how the club started and what Stockton was like at the turn of the century, 1900s, because we were a contender. We could have been the state capital. We were one of the 4 top cities in California. And to always have the mindset that we're in now, which has kind of come from the Fat City days, you know, the boxing, the mentality of down and out and on the streets and Skid Row. We kind of have that sensibility about us even today. But where we were in the Belle Epoque in terms of the way the city had progressed, the amount of the importance of the agriculture, the manufacturing, Ben Holt and all that, her book helps us understand where we were and can give us some motivation to get back some of those elements now in a much more diverse society, of course. And then another book by author Elaine Dixon Ugarkovic. She had a grandfather who served in World War I, and she was interested in these 2 plaques down at the Civic Auditorium that lists the men's names who mustered for World War I, but who died in the service to the country. Not the ones who went and came back, but the ones who died from San Joaquin County. And so what she did was meticulously research each man, where he lived in Stockton, where he came from, who his parents were, what he did for a living, where he served, how he died, and where he was buried. Wow. And found a picture of each man sometimes from news sources, sometimes from family archives, whatever. So again, not a page turner, but information that if you wanted to know about it, it's there. So I'm really, really interested in finding archival information and getting it out and having it accessible to the public. So we've published quite a few books, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and children's books.
Wow. Quite a breadth, of works and kind of topics. Really? I love the history component is super interesting to me. Mm-hmm. I mean, and the fact that she took the time to do all that research and really kind of memorialize these people who did sacrifice their lives. That's wild. I love that. So as a publisher, I'm sure, there's so much going into it. If you could kind of describe what the experience is like for you in one word, what would that be?
Chaotic.
Okay, I like that. Lots going on. I'm sure, handling the author, trying to decide, how long should this be, how much editing should go into this. I'm sure there's a lot going into that. What can you say as far as the role of Tuleburg Press and working with authors? What are those actual activities that you guys perform as the publisher? Because maybe some people are not sure, what does it mean to be published? What does a publisher do for me? Yeah.
There's a whole range of things, and I've worked with a lot of people. There are people who have come in and said, I want to write a story about my experience. And I say, okay, write it. And those types of people really need a structure. They need to come to a class, and they need to write or write with a group, and they need to create some momentum and just do the work. Again, the work of writing is to spend a great deal of time with yourself and to be as true to your story as you possibly can, whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction. So some people really think there's some kind of magic pill like weight loss, that if I just wave my hand over you, it will happen. And it doesn't. It's just a lot of serious sit down time. Other people have come to me with a group of material. Maybe folders full of clippings about their life story or things that they've collected over time. And again, they say, this is my book because it represents some period or all of their life, and it's not a book. They need to understand that things that have been written about you, you do not control or own the copyright of that material. So you have to basically take all these things and create anecdotal accounts, or you have to rewrite that story. You can use that if you get permission, but that's been really troublesome for quite a few people who have lived some very interesting lives and have said to me, well, look, I have all of this. And especially for people, elders who have not really grown up with computers, they don't understand that it has to be typed. It either had to be typed once upon a time before computers, or it has to be put into the computer. It has to be one cohesive file. Okay, if I get to that point, if someone says, here is my digital, here's my manuscript, and that's the process we're in right now, then we decide whether or not the book is fits our mission, number one, and number two, if we feel we can sell it. That's why there's not a lot of duplications, and why I don't print poetry every year, or basically I have to determine whether there's a market for it. I actually use 3 of Tuleburg books at Delta College, and I have used 4 altogether. So if I believe that our English department can benefit from it, and several other faculty members have used the books too, then I know we can sell the book. So those are the 2 factors that really matter. It's if it fits the mission, and if I believe there's a market for it. And then the third thing is, if we decide to publish it, the authors do not pay anything. We absorb all the costs, and we go through the process of getting it ready to print. And some books, I've been working on a book right now with Bill Maxwell. A lot of people know William Maxwell, who runs the archives at the Bank of Stockton, and who still sells rare books online as Maxwell's Bookmark. Had the Harvard bookstore originally, then had a bookstore on Yosemite Street, and then had where Cocoa Rose is now, the Bookmark. He took it over, and then it was Maxwell's Bookmark. So it's his memoir about being a bookseller in Stockton. We've been working on that book for 2 years. So when he first presented it, it went to a committee, and several other people read it. And as they read, they had questions, and those questions turned into more writing. Because sometimes when people write, they think they just dump it all. Here it is. Well, readers, your beta readers, your readers read it again and say, well, what about this? What about that? It presents holes, or there's questions. Once we satisfy that, then it goes to copy editing, and we try to, oh God, it's the worst part, because I swear to you, as soon as a book's published, you'll open it up and you'll find a mistake.
Oh no.
And I mean, I find mistakes.
No matter how many times you read it.
Yeah, I find mistakes in books all the time. And so that's what they say, the Muslims say, only Allah is perfect. So there's always a tangled thread in every woven rug, or something like that only Allah is perfect. Anyway, so that's our process. And once we get it ready to publish, I usually design the covers myself. I engage myself in as much as I can, but we work with the author. They have ideas, but I kind of design the way the book looks. You'll notice some series of books, like think of like the Louis L'Amour Western series. They all look exactly the same. Every paperback has the same type of cover. It's the same size, etc. Well, with us, we let the book project dictate the way it looks. So the size, the cover. So we have books of all different sizes. So then there's no one thing that says this is a Tuleburg book except the logo. But that involves the author can be as hands-on or not with that process. And I'm very fond of working with local artists also, and other graphic artists. Everything is local as much as possible, to work on the covers. Like Angela Maxson did this cover. Michael Oliva, who's a graphic artist, he did the cover for Phil's book. Victoria Jordan took the picture of the Philomathian Club for the cover of that book, etc. Now, if someone is not a Tuleburg contender, their book does not fit the mission, I have spent lots of time just helping people edit. I have had consulting time with people where they come in and I say, I can't publish your book, it doesn't fit, but let me give you this advice. And sometimes we have several meetings. Sometimes people pay me, sometimes they don't. Whatever money they pay me goes right to the organization. I personally don't take a salary from Tuleburg. Do I pay myself in any way at Tuleburg? So I am a volunteer. And if people, sometimes I do charge people for the services and sometimes I don't. It's kind of a case by case situation. But I have helped people get their books on Amazon and do a self-publishing route. So I just let people know what I know about publishing if I don't publish them myself. But again, it's just like I tell my students, I'll help you as far as you'll help yourself. I can't write your book.
No.
But
No.
that's it. It's always a collaboration.
That's very interesting to hear, that you're willing to provide, sometimes a little bit of insight, even if you couldn't publish someone's work at Tuleburg Press. That's very cool to know. What would you say is like the most common question that you get asked about publishing and the publishing process? And how would you answer it?
I feel like what I have to say sometimes is just as bad as grades, how grades work in writing to deflate people, because I mean, every week I get someone says, I have a book. Would you publish it? That's the question. Would you publish me? That in and of itself lets you know that people want to be heard, that people want to express themselves, and people have something they think is valuable to put out there. I don't think it's a fame thing like being a star. I think people are compelled to storytell. I think it's part of our human DNA to communicate, or we wouldn't be wired for language. We wouldn't be. But the problem is I do think that people really, I just need to let people know there are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. And people really need to know what the market is for stories. I get stories that I've heard before. If it's not really your story, and that's what's unique, like your fingerprint, or your, a retinal scan. But to write a story about just X characters overcoming X obstacles. I mean, go on Amazon and look at how many books are exactly like that. True. And those books are just not interesting to me. You may have enjoyed writing that story, but that it just basically doesn't have legs. I don't know what to tell you. And if I'm not the right publisher, there's a book called The Writer's Market. It's like this huge thing, and probably they print it out every year. It's about $30, and I'm sure there's probably a digital version at this point, but it lists all the publishers in every genre. There's a genre index in the back, and there's a subject in the back. So if you write an LGBTQ Western, there's a publisher for you.
Specific. Wow. That's so
right.
Cool.
I mean, you just got to you have to know how to market your own work too. And that's the kind of stuff I tell people.
Very interesting. And so once you've kind of chosen an author and you've decided, yes, we can publish this for you. You said you guys cover all of the kind of printing costs. How do you both make money from the sale of the book? Like, how does the author make money, and how does Tuleburg Press make money?
Well, okay. So think about Tuleburg, a local nonprofit. We have a budget of about $100,000 a year now. We started with $1,250 in 2012. Wow. We have the cost now of any other organization. We have overhead for our building. We have staff, salaries, we have insurance, etc. We are a company, not just a nonprofit. Everyone needs to understand that a nonprofit is a business. It just has tax implications so that you can donate, because I have to receive more funds from contributions that I do from sales, or then I am not a nonprofit. So the print run for a book, the most we've printed at one time is 1,000. Most of the time it's 300 to 500. That makes us, like every other across the United States, a small press. So a book, let's say a book costs $10. We'll keep these in round figures. We sell it for $20. It costs me, let's say, $1,000 to print. So as soon as I reach my $1,000 in sales, then the author makes 8.5%, 8.5% of the income after that. So you can tell right now, let's say I make $10,000 on a book, 8.5%. That's not a lot of money. I don't even know if you can have a really wild weekend in San Francisco on that kind of money.
Makes sense.
So I tell people right away, why do you want this book published? Because if you want to make money, this is not the place for it. And my point is to make enough profit so I have money to continue to publish books, because I don't have a, sometimes I fundraise for a particular book. CB Merchants Services Foundation, CB Merchant Group, has given me anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000 a year towards particular book projects. The CA Webster Foundation awarded us $3,000 toward the anthology. So I do go out and look for funds, and then those, and basically the anthology so far has cost about $6,000. So where does that other $3,000 come from? Wolfhound cost $14,000. So each book, depending on its size, the page numbers and the art involved, whether it's color or not, all of that sort of stuff is part of the budget. And so our standard deal is 8.5% after costs. And then I pay royalties pretty much after the book print has been sold, because I don't send people $20 or $13.60. I wait until there's a sizable check. And to tell you the truth, all but 2 of my authors have just said, no, you just keep, I don't want any more.
Wow.
So they know it's a nonprofit. And then some books I've reprinted 3 times. That allows me to reprint the book again and again and again. So it's kind of a rollover thing. So it's not a way to get rich, but it is a way to have a book in your hand and to have local people read it. And that brings me to really my next biggest problem, and the biggest weakness of my own and of my organization, is the distribution. Because I am only capable of distributing the book locally. And I have never found anyone who said, oh my God, that's my calling. I want to help you create more distribution options. And I have not been that excited about having the book at, even at Amazon. They take out a huge chunk of every book.
Yeah.
And I don't print enough books to send to the warehouse to have them ship it. So I have to ship all the books. I get the order from Amazon, but I have to ship the book. And for every book that's $20, they take out 6. So the distribution chains are really difficult. And the best way to sell your book is for the author to sell the book themselves. Go to readings. I mean, Joe Mays, every time he meets somebody, he says, you should read my book. And he hands them a little flyer. And we print all his flyers. We make it easy for him. And we schedule events for him to be at. And he schedules events for us to attend. And when an author is hands off on the book, we had one who didn't want to have anything to do with that. Didn't want to do readings. Didn't want to do anything. The book sold because we used it at Delta. Other books kind of just are there because I believe that Tuleburg just actually is our footprint in the sand. And, if we're lucky, it will solidify like a fossil. And historically, that footprint will always be there, will always be part of Stockton's history. But the money is incidental. Now, let me just keep going here to talk about Deborah Maroulis, or Deborah Crosland, as she goes by her pen name. Her first book, she writes young adult novels. She's not a Tuleburg writer, but we like to work with writers and involve them in workshops or panels where we can show people how professionals. I mean, she's an educator, she's a teacher, but she writes on the side. And she actually was able to get her dissertation and write a book during COVID during the same year. I mean, the woman's a goddess. Anyway, so Deborah, her first book was a small press publication. It's out of print already, a couple hundred copies. But the strength of that book got her up the food chain in terms of agents and publishers. And now she makes not only, she gets an advance, which could be in the double figures. I don't know what really it is. Could be 20,000, could be 60,000. I don't know. She gets an advance and she gets royalties that are more significant. And the book's going to be printed like 100,000 copies.
Yeah.
So there are those kinds of writers in Stockton, all kinds of them. People who write romance novels, people who write science fiction, and people who have agents and publishers. And we like to keep that community, be aware of that community and involve them as much as possible, but they don't need Tuleburg. And their books don't fit Tuleburg's mission. But that's where the money is, not with small presses. Small presses is about your personal growth. So,
there you go. Yeah. Kind of having the book in hand, like you're saying, yes, I published this, I'm an author. I love it. And it sounds then to me, you said you do kind of smaller batches, but it sounded like you do reprints, as needed. So for the author, if they have, if they've used you as a publisher, are they limited at all in terms of where they can sell or, how they can distribute the book outside of Tuleburg?
Well, there are some laws involved, and that people need to be aware of it. But mostly it is that if you are a vendor of your own publication, you need to have a business license or some kind of legal entity, and you need to pay sales tax. I'm going to let that sit right there. Most of our authors sell books at readings or sell the books for Tuleburg at readings. And so they report the sales and we pay the sales tax every year, hundreds of dollars in sales tax. The publisher, the authors are pretty much free to buy the book from me at cost. Our contract says they can buy so many, but once the book has been on the shelf for a while, I'll pretty much sell to the authors, like the Great Chinese New Year's Race, which are plays by Heather Rule. They are Chinese folktales turned into drama, turned into scripts that kids can actually read and act out. And then Val Akoba actually puts on her Red Phoenix Rising company. She produces those pieces. We got to the end of that run. There were some 60 books left or something. We just sold them to her. Now Heather can sell those books at all the various things that they do, and I don't have it on my shelf anymore. So it's small. We're local. We're friends. We know each other, and so we do whatever the author needs to have done within reason. Joe wants to reprint his book already, and I said, let's. One of his other goals, though, is to have an audiobook, to have his son read the book and to create a downloadable audiobook on Amazon. So that's a big project. Do I know how to do that? Nope. But that's what I'm
There's a first for everything.
That's what I'm going to learn how to do next before I do another big print run of that book. We still have a couple hundred of that book left, but the way we sell it at Delta, I sell like 35 copies a semester. So, the book will sell out eventually, as they all do. But it is a little bit like having children. They grow up, but they hang around. And, you still have to keep selling all your books.
They become adults.
Yeah. And just like kids, everybody's interested in them when they're born and not so interested 2 years later.
Oh, no. Very, very interesting. And I know right now you guys are looking for manuscripts. You have kind of like a manuscript submission time period open through October 31st. Can you tell us a little bit about that? So you're looking for some new pieces for Tuleburg. Tell us about it.
Every year we have that open period, September 1 through October 31st, and the instructions are on the website. I cannot tell you how important it is to follow the instructions. That was probably the biggest problem with the anthology, were pieces coming in that needed so much more work. The instructions are very simple. They tell you what point size, what font to use, and how to submit, how many pages. I, as a small press, will kindly say to you, this does not fit our mission. Thank you. And I will say something about the work. Number 2, I will say, this fits our mission, but you did not follow the directions. I'm going to send it back to you. Please comply. There's reasons for that. If it just doesn't fit at all, I say, thank you very much. Try again. Pay attention to the mission. Once October 31st comes and we look at we look at what we've received, there's usually about 12, between 12 to 15. And then I assemble a committee made up of community authors and interested parties and board members, and they read through those, and we decide 1 to 3 of those that we think the mission and are marketable.
Mm.
And tell everybody else, thank you very much. And then we ask for the whole manuscript. So we only ask for 10 pages at first.
Mm.
And so then we read the whole manuscript and then choose. Sometimes it's just one, sometimes it's 0. We look at the whole manuscript and say, no, thank you very much anyway. But if we decide to work on it, then we start the whole process of reading the whole manuscript with a committee and because I don't do this all by myself as far as that goes. And then we go through the process with the individual. So it's really, really important. I'll tell you this story. Marvin Malone published a poetry journal called Wormwood Review for like 20 years through the 60s and 70s until he passed. And I was a young poet sending my work out. And when I found out there was a poetry publisher in Stockton, I thought, oh, I'm in. I have this shoe in, So I sent this manila envelope with like everything I'd ever written to this publisher. And then I called like a week later. I said, well, what did you think? And he goes, who are you? And I explained it. And I explained that I sent it. And he says, oh, I threw it away.
Oh.
And I was like, well, why? He goes,
yeah.
You have no idea what I publish or how to submit your work. So in that exuberance, I mean, we're all kind of like that. Oh, I've written this. I want to share it. You have to follow the directions. You have to find out what kind of work is accepted. You have to read the publication you want to get into to see if your work fits it. Because if all publications accepted everything, why would we have as many magazines? Why would we have as many journals? You can't submit a psychology article to an engineering publication. I mean, you see what I'm saying? People have to pay attention. So that's the first.
Does it align?
Yeah, that was my first big lesson. It's like, oh my God. Now, though, if it weren't for Marvin Malone, Tuleburg would not be where it is today, because he had that small letterpress, the Pearl, that his daughter, Krista, sold at his estate to Bill Maxwell, and Bill Maxwell donated it to Tuleburg. And the part of the reason we have a brick and mortar place was to be able to use the press. So even though Marvin threw all my poetry out, Tuleburg exists today, really in part because of Marvin Malone.
Wow, what an interesting story. And yeah, I guess it kind of gave you a little bit of foundation, and it helps you encourage other writers to make sure that they're paying attention. Like, where are you submitting this to? Are you following all the instructions? And it's very interesting but intentional process. Definitely.
Well, it is. And I think it applies to every aspect of life. If you're going to interview for a job, you need to do your research, find out, more about the company, what the expectations are, talk to people who've worked there. I mean, these are just life skills. There is nothing magical about this.
Right. And so for this manuscript submission, I know some of the works you decide, yes, we're going to publish it, but I noticed you also sometimes could mentor a writer. Can you tell us a little bit about how does that work?
Well, that kind of falls into that other category. Like I said, when people have asked to be edited before, I'll just do as much as the person asks. Please read this, or what should I do with it? Let me give you a good success story. Ed Bonilla wrote this science fiction dystopian thing, and it did fit the Stockton mission, but the reader committee that I had didn't really like one particular aspect of the book, which doesn't really matter to this audience. And so we declined. But he went on to find another publisher and has been very successful with that book. It's called 5 Clones. And but I did everything. I mean, I participated in a launch party with him, or held one. I mean, I just do whatever else I can do. He didn't really need writing mentoring, but sometimes if I can't take on, I can think of one young man who wrote another science fiction. Science fiction is just so popular. And so many people are exposed to games, video games and everything. And boy, those are pretty old plot lines, but people still want to write those kinds of stories. And I didn't have the time, but I know other people in the community who are also readers and editors who are willing to work with people for not for a fee necessarily, but for a certain period of time to kind of push them in the right direction. So I bring to bear other people in the community. I know a couple of copy editors that will work for a fee, and I just bring whatever resources to bear in the process. I haven't had anybody who was committed for a long period of time.
Okay, makes sense.
To a process. But like a lot of people in the community, we get asked to read books as beta readers for people who have their own publishers and just need more feedback. And I've done that for quite a few people. I mean, I love to read, so.
That sounds fun, yeah. That sounds like a really kind of a fun activity.
Good, I'll tap you next time.
Yeah, might as well. And for this manuscript submission, are there any limitations on the type of work that people can submit? And by that, I mean, can it be, poetry, a novel, like maybe a screenplay? What can it be? Are there any limitations?
I would have to say that screenplays don't make sense for us.
Okay.
They don't, because you don't really publish a screenplay in the same way. If you're going to write a screenplay, you need to shop it around in LA or San Francisco, where screenwriters, work and get noticed. I mean, it doesn't make any sense for us to bind that for you. I mean, I could print multiple copies for you and put it in a spiral, and so you've got copies like that, but that's not what we do. But I could offer that. If someone said, I've got a screenplay and I want 20 copies and I can't afford to go to Kinko's or whatever, can you put it in a manuscript format? Yes, I could do that for them. But as far as genres go, I am very interested if someone has a comic book or anime, or even, I know somebody once was working on a coloring book with Delta wildlife and flora fauna, but he had a publisher or he had another venue for that. But it doesn't matter to me. It could be a Western, it could be fiction or nonfiction. It could be a novel, it could be poetry, it could be a children's book. But then again, I'm going to look at what's the last children's book I published. Do I still have it on the shelf? Can I market it? So I don't care, but I am very interested in all of our immigrant stories. And so people who write about their experience in Stockton now as an Afghan, as a Sri Lankan, as a Puerto Rican, as whatever, those stories, I thought it would be interesting to tell the Hmong stories. And we didn't really get any writers from the Hmong community in Stockton, but in Fresno, quite a few people have been published with their story. So Fresno or Bakersfield, I can't remember which, but South Valley has had more success in getting that community to tell its stories. But I am very interested in basically all the other aspects. If someone wanted to write about gang life, getting out of a gang, getting into a gang, what it's like to be in juvenile detention and out of juvenile. I mean, we have so many experiences. What college life is like here. What's like growing up in a certain neighborhood. Those rags to riches or from, disaster to success stories, the Horatio Alger thing, that's always a big, an important thing. I've had people ask me, what about stories of raising a disabled child? Now, I don't know. I would be very interested actually in an anthology of chapters written by 10 to 12 different people who raised a child with a different kind of disability, because I think I could sell that. I think I could sell these stories as an anthology versus one story. It might have more marketability with the hospitals, with people saying, you should read this book. This is the problem your child is going to have. Here's a story. I don't know. I just think it would be easier to sell an anthology of that nature. But it's kind of like, it when you see it. Again, Maxine Hong Kingston's book was so weird. It was 5 chapters. 2 based in China, then The Bridge when her mom came to the United States, and then 2 chapters set in the United States. And they were each of her, the chapter in Woman Warrior, you can read by itself, stand alone. but the arc of it and her story, I mean, the only chapter that's really about Stockton, seriously, is the last chapter. But then that's her whole story of growing up here. But, when you read something like that, I mean, I know there's someone out there, or Leonard Gardner's Fat City. I mean, Stockton is a character in that novel. And he writes so that the setting of Stockton mirrors the character's depression or anxiety or progress. The character of Stockton is alive in the book. And I'm reading a book right now. Actually, it's the final book in the Wicked series.
Okay.
The final is called Out of Oz. And the first chapter is about Dorothy Gale and her aunt, Auntie Em, and Henry going into San Francisco. And it's set in San Francisco. You're walking the streets of Chinatown. I mean, you're in San Francisco in that chapter. It's not hard to do. And people have, I mean, when I read a book, I pick up a novel and it's about a place that I've been to, like San Remo, Italy. When I read that, I'm there. And so that's, there's nothing wrong about writing about this place.
Right. And you experience it every day. So you notice things,
right.
every day. You notice smells, right. Things that you see, noises, everything.
Mm-hmm.
You can really paint a picture.
Right.
So this manuscript submission, again, for anyone who might be interested, it's running, the period is open through October 31st. So make sure to follow the rules, get it in on time. And now I'd like to kind of shift gears and talk a little bit about your poetry anthology that you did just finish. Yeah. So tell us about it. How long has that been in the making? How many poets were featured? Yeah. Tell us about your new release.
Do you want me to be really honest about this, right?
Whatever you like.
All right. This poetry anthology has been in the works for so long, it's painful. The idea of doing a Stockton anthology is well described in the book with the commentary about Catherine Webster. Katie Webster has now passed as well, but she was a poet. She was an adjunct professor of poetry at the University of Pacific. She won the Colorado Review Prize for her book, Thicket Daybreak. And she was the editor of Farm Poems. Her family is a Jack Tone pioneer family, ranching family, raising cattle. And she was very close to the land and very much enamored of both, ranchers and farmers and the land and how things grow. And it just fabulous poetry in minute detail about wasps and figs and leaves. I'm just a fantastic writer. And we were together one time and I said, well, I just want to be just like you. I think I want to do a Stockton anthology. Okay. I think that was 30 years ago. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
And then somewhere along the line, when I was on that Marion Jacobs Literary Forum committee, I had conversations with committee members and said, let's do a Stockton anthology. And I had one person I thought was going to be the editor. And that did not work out. No names, no shame, no blame. We tried it again. I tried to hook in a Delta College faculty member, also a publisher and a poet, to try to get young people involved, middle schoolers, high schoolers, college students. Marginal success. Third time. Now we're up to the present time, just 2 years ago. I got another person involved and said, here's what we need and let's go for it. That worked better than the last 2 attempts, but life intervened and this person couldn't complete the task because of just extenuating circumstances. So I basically took the project over again last spring, all of it. And by that time, we had actually put out the call for the poems and some people had replied. We had charged them a reading fee because we thought we should throw some money at it. And then we decided, no, we're going to start over. We sent the money back. Were you part of that? You got your $10 back? We put the call out again. I don't think I paid. We put the call out again. And that time that person was still involved and the poems came in willy-nilly, again, not following the directions. But because we had to pull from the community so much, we had to beg people, right? This is what a poem of place is about. And part of my mission is educating people. It's like really raising the whole bar for the book arts and for writing in general. When we finally got all the poems, there was so much editing that had to be done. And then sending the poems back saying, do you like it like this? Because people type on an 8.5 by 11 sheet. And once it gets down to 6 by 9, line breaks happen differently. And the poem may break at a place at the end of the page and go on to the next page. And you don't want that one line up there. So there's lots of things you look at visually when you try to fix it. And some people, when we said, do you approve of this poem, said yes. And then when they saw it in print, said no. So it's like, there's a real big difference between, when you actually see it in the book. So bottom line, the book was ready. You have to call it. There's what we say too sometimes in writing is that there's no project that's finished. You just abandon it. At some point, you pull the plug. And,
you have
to because writing is like painting. I mean, you could change it tomorrow. You could white out something. You could, paintings.
You could always tinker with it. Exactly.
Yeah, you could find something. You go, oh, why did I say it like that?
Yes.
I could change this word, that word. So for the whole public to know, the book was printed last week, and we got it, and we found out there was a serious error in it. The pagination was off. The table of contents and the pagination of the whole book was off by 2. So the book launch that we had last Friday was the largest proofreading session ever held because we said, all right, we're going to reprint this whole book. But we want to know now, if there's anything else you want changed, let us know. So I got a slew of people who actually put their eyes on their own poem then and said, oh, I'd really like to change this or change that. So Diane Smith at Tuleburg Press and I have been working on the book again, and we're going to reprint it, all 1,000 copies again. At the book launch the other night on Friday night, it was so great. I mean, the vibe in the room was wonderful. We didn't know then that Jazz Marie Latour was the new poet laureate, but anybody who had looked at the council agenda would have known that she was approved last night at the city council meeting. But she read, as did our poet laureate emeritus, Tom of Brisbane, and a slew of poets from throughout the county, really not all Stockton. And some of them had written poems for the first time. Some of them were academics, from colleges and who teach writing. And others are people who are more readily known at open mic events. So there's quite a bit of diversity, both ethnically and age-wise, men and women, young and old. It was great. And you were there, so you saw how people felt about seeing it. Now, as a professional who's, like I said in my email, yes, we made a mistake. We didn't do anything illegal, immoral, or unfixable. And,
there you go.
So let's just fix it. So we're reprinting the whole book, and we gave away all those books. I only took home one box of 60 books that night. We gave away 940 books that night. And yes, there's a problem with them, but they're out there in the community. Some teachers took 2 boxes. Tom of Brisbane took 2 boxes. She'll use them in all her workshops. And now we're going to print 1,000 more. And all the poets will get their 10 copies, and then I'll have 500 to sell. And if I don't sell them, I'll be giving them away to schools and to whatever, wherever I feel that I can best distribute the books. But here's what people really need to know. We're going to do that anthology every 2 years. So we're going to take a break for this year, publish something else perhaps or not. And then we'll do another. I'm going to try to do a poetry anthology every other year. It won't always be poems of place, but it most likely will be themed in some way. Because I need to encourage people, especially young writers, to branch out of I'm going to write this poem about my miserable life or my terrible love affair. You can tell most poems are driven or motivated by an intense emotional feeling, mostly negative, because it's a release. I cannot tell you how many poems like that I have read over 50 years. And I need poets to understand that there's a world out there, and you need to get beyond your own emotional need to release, to express what's going on in your world, and to learn about poetry, study poetry, read great poets, find out what makes a poem, and and progress. Don't write the same old love breakup story over and over again. As a teacher of poetry at Delta, I read a lot of that. So
makes sense.
my life sucks. It's a poem. No, sorry. So anyway, every 2 years, so you can look forward to that.
Exciting. Yeah, that's great to know. And yeah, for anyone who wasn't at the launch, it was really fun, really awesome, just seeing so many poets and just creative people all in the same room, just sharing, reading their poems and supporting each other. That was beautiful. I hope you guys do that every time, honestly.
Oh,
it
sure.
was awesome.
Well, it's just like children's theater or theater in general. If you have a cast of 2, it's hard to build your audience. But if you have a cast of 20, obviously then you have a lot more audience that's going to be vested, in the product and come and support you. I do want to give a shout out to Nena's and to Comida de Jen and to Michael's Heavenly Sweet for providing food for us. And a lot of people probably don't know this, but the San Joaquin Community Foundation has a meals program that if you're a nonprofit and you are serving largely low-income people at some kind of event, which this one certainly qualified for, there's a list of restaurants you can solicit from, and you get your menu decided, and then San Joaquin Community Foundation pays the bill.
Wow.
So the food was provided by those individuals, but paid for by the Community Foundation of San Joaquin. So that is really important for people to know about.
Definitely. And it was really good too. Awesome. Okay. So we talked about the poetry anthology, and as a reminder, anyone who's watching, please type in a question for Paula and you will get your own free copy. Potentially, you'll be entered in a chance to win.
You're breaking up a little bit now, Courtney.
Oh, can you hear me? Hopefully you can hear me still. Looking forward, what other kind of works are you planning to publish in the next year or so? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. You're
Okay,
breaking
good.
up a little bit, but again, that's a question from the public. Basically, it's going to depend on, I don't really have a plan. It depends on what comes in, what people submit. If I had a pet project that has nothing to do with our publishing window or our submission window, it would be to all the writers out there, freelancers and everything. I would like to publish an anthology called From the Archives. And I would like people to research what's in the archives at the University of Pacific, at Delta, at the Historical Museum at Mickey Grove, and at the Hagen Museum, because they have basements full of stuff that's about Stockton history that no one will ever see unless you're a researcher. Wow. But if a group of freelancers, if anybody who's a freelance writer with San Joaquin Magazine or Her Story or any of the other publications locally, Stocktonia News Service, anybody who's a freelancer wants to dig into the archives and write an article, I would love to do an anthology like that, because I'm very interested in bringing to light material that people don't have access to. Beautiful. But that doesn't really have anything to do with the submission period. But I'd like to do an anthology like that. And again, I guess I'm interested in an anthology from parents raising children with disabilities. That's kind of always been on the back burner.
Okay. So now let's shift gears a little bit to the Right Place. So can you tell us, where is the Right Place located? What kinds of workshops do you guys have coming up?
Okay, the Right Place is in downtown in Court Tower, so the corner of Sutter and Main Street. Court Tower is now it's not owned by the Court Company anymore. It's owned by Pacific Development Group, but they're maintaining the name of the building, which is terrific. And at the Right Place, we offer creative writing workshops, but book binding, letterpress printing, and paper making. Those are the 3 areas. So coming up, we have a whole schedule of classes on different types of bindings, Coptic binding, drum leaf binding. These are all ways to connect books. We offer paper making all the time. If I can get a cohort of people to do pieces to piece. If you're interested in actually going through that process, just text me and I can talk about pieces to piece more. We have this memoir class that just started. I'm going to start a 3-week poetry class. On our website, Tuleburgpress.com, are all of the classes. They range in price from $20 to $75. If you're certified low income, I can waive the fees because we get grants based on serving low-income people. So cost should never be a barrier. Of course, if people can pay, that's terrific. But we also engage quite a few people in the community who have either taken Tuleburg classes before or taken book arts classes other places. So if you know how to do a certain binding or you know how to do certain paper processing practices, I'd love to engage you as a teacher.
Awesome. Awesome. So it sounds like it's for children. Some of them could be for kids and adults, would you
Right.
say? Okay,
Right.
good. Anyone who's interested about bookmaking or, anything involved with what Paula was just sharing, please check it out. It's a cool place. Check out the right place right here in downtown. And sometimes you host Dungeons and Dragons nights. Is that correct?
Right.
Tell
Now
us a
you
little
might
bit
think that's
about it.
you might think that's a little bit of mission creep, but it's not, because Dungeons and Dragons is a role-playing game. And one of our board members is a dungeon master, and he basically has created an opportunity for about 20 to 25 people to play. We have 3 games that go. It's full right now, but if you want to be on the waiting list to play, it's the second and fourth Wednesday night, and it's really amazing to listen to people play this game because they assume they are characters. Their characters have a range of skills, and they create these scenarios, and the dungeon master keeps the narrative going. And as things progress, people contribute to the storyline and use their skills to create mayhem or get out of disasters situations. I was there one night working in my office while they were playing, and then I hear people saying, save the baby, and I'm going, I don't know what they're doing, but it's an adult game. We do have one 12-year-old, but we advertised it for adults. So because there is a kids Dungeons and Dragons game at Trokey Library, so we wanted to provide that. It's just another way to get people downtown, which is another thing that's really important to me, and to engage adults, in a place where they can, you do have to clean up, but it's not like trying to host people in your home.
Exactly. It's a shared space, community space.
Right. But there's a huge resurgence in Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm glad to see it because it is storytelling. It's great.
Definitely. So if you're interested, keep an eye out for when maybe they'll be accepting some new players. And now I'd like to just talk about Tuleburg Press. How are you funded? And how can people contribute to you? Because it's important. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are a 501c3, so your donations and contributions are tax deductible insofar as those laws are still relevant with the tax structure we have now. But we are funded both privately and publicly. We get funding from the Community Development Block Grant funds of the city and the county. The city basically allows us to be downtown because that grant that I write every year pays for our rent and utilities. The grant that I get from CDBG from the county pays for staff. It's only $10,000, but it's a chunk of the 60 or 70 that I have to come up with every year. We also participate in as many small fundraisers like 209 Gives or Giving Tuesday, those types of online platforms. We accept the donations of cars, any vehicles. We have a vehicle donation program. And that is so easy, any running or not. The company that I work with is so responsive. They pick it up, they take care of the paperwork. We split that with them, but sometimes it's really easy money. You get rid of a junker sitting in your driveway or your garage, and we end up with some money. It's great. That kind of ebbs and flows as people know about it, but lots of organizations like the Children's Museum and the Friends of the Shelter program, lots of nonprofits have the vehicle donation. So if you are into any support of a nonprofit, check and see if they have that, because it's not just Tuleburg that accepts those. And then our annual fundraiser is called Fully Booked because of the tagline, get your tickets before we are fully booked. So some newbies have said, wait a minute, it says fully booked. Can I still get a ticket? And I'm okay, well, you don't understand.
Like, that's the name of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the name of it. So that has been held annually on the last Friday of September at St. Basil. It's coming up. Tickets are $100 per person, $185 for a couple. Reserving a table of 10 is $1,000. We have fabulous entertainment. We have a wonderful auction, and we generate anywhere between, I'm going to say, $30,000 and $45,000 a year on that event, and that's unrestricted. And that's really important to a nonprofit, because then I can use that wherever I need it. If I write a grant like the CDBG grant, it only goes for rent. And you can't move monies around. Sometimes the public is confused when they go to city council and they say, why can't you fund more police? Why can't you save the trees? Because budgets are budgets, and you get money from certain sources and they go into that line item and you can't really move it around. So once you understand that, at least some of your anxiety and your frustration can be alleviated. But unrestricted funds are really important to us. And we write grants to the California Arts Council, to the Stockton Arts Commission, to various local foundations like the Courtney Family Foundation, the Webster Family Foundation, the 54 Club, which was formerly, Financial Center Credit Union, everywhere, Stockton Rotary, CB Merchants. I mean, there isn't a stone unturned. We're always looking for funds. We will accept donations of any kind. I will also say, because we fund little free libraries, we fill little free libraries all over the community, and we give away books all the time at various events. Donations of books are always accepted. So Fully Booked is September 29th. You can go online on our website to Fully Booked, tuleburgpress.com/fully-booked. And basically it tells you, how to donate there or how to get a ticket for the event. There is one very special aspect about Fully Booked. I've always used it as a venue to introduce the audience to a variety of entertainers and other artists and performers in the community. One year we had the Chimera Belly Dance Company as our entertainment.
Oh, cool.
I've had harpists. I've had acoustic acoustic guitarists. Last year we had Stockton Soul, and it was fabulous to introduce the community, or that group of people, to Darcy Ford Jones and Stockton Soul. This year, it's the Chavez High School Jazz Band, 26-member jazz band, and Art Coleman directing. And if you've been following the news, the new administration building for SUSD is named after Art Coleman. He's a fabulous educator, and it's going to be really nice to see that many kids at Fully Booked this year. And then instead of having a keynote speaker, we're going to have 4 poets read. 2 of them from our Sligo Scholars Program, because we send poets every year. Well, we have for 2 years now, sent poets to Ireland to study. And then we have a poet from the anthology, and 2 from Sligo, 1 from the anthology. Oh, and Meltor Sagoon.
Oh,
He's the next. His book is going to be launched Friday the 13th at Catalyst, and his book is his own poetry book. I've been trying to publish Meltor for I don't know, more than 10 years, and now his book is coming out October 13th. And so he will be reading. So instead of a keynote speaker, we have 4 poets reading a poem in that time slot. So anyway, Fully Booked is a very fun party and a really wonderful event. So I hope you can come.
Yes. So check it out. Make sure to get your tickets before it is fully booked. Support Tuleburg Press. Support the right place. And I want to just say, what do you personally want to accomplish as president of Tuleburg Press? Like, you're responsible for so much. What are your goals in the role that you have now?
That if I died tomorrow, it would still keep going.
Okay. So longevity, legacy, keep it running.
That's it. I think Stockton, like the soil, can grow anything, but the vagaries of climate, of water resources makes growth tentative, and sometimes things fail. So we pretty much can grow anything. There's space in this community to start anything. Maintaining it is the challenge. And I am in the process of, really considering a succession plan. Who wants to run Tuleburg Press? Somebody out there. I have some fabulous staff members now. I've had people want to work with me and go, okay, I've had enough of you. Done. I have people that are, loyal to the core, and people that just say, you're not my cup of tea. But that's the way I am as an instructor too. I say, you're a consumer. You make your choice. So having Tuleburg continue, and I have had board members say, well, what happens if we can't? Well, we tried. And the way nonprofits dissolve is that basically you turn your funding over to another nonprofit. The funding would all go to the San Joaquin Community Foundation to disperse to other arts organizations. And we would open up the doors to all the different nonprofits to come and get the equipment. That would be what would happen. It's just like any other. That's what happened to Jagged Lines of Imagination. And it happens. Things are born and things die. So if I had my druthers, I'd find somebody just as excited about books and publishing as I am, who would want to do it after I'm gone.
Yes. Well, we want to keep you here. We want to keep you alive. And do you have any openings right now in terms of the board or volunteer roles at Tuleburg Press for anyone who might be that successor?
Well, volunteer management is tough, because if you don't really hook a person, I can always use people who want to help distribute books for little free libraries. Some people do that on their own anyway. We always are looking for people to join the board, and the board, it needs to be ethnically diverse. I would like to have some younger people on the board. Most of us are 40 plus, 40 to 80. It would be really nice to have some younger people. But boards are work. You cannot be on a board just to have your name on the stationery. There's a lot of work. And I have some board members that contribute in really significant ways, and I couldn't do it without them. And that's what I need. It's a volunteer opportunity, but it's an unpaid position being on the board. But I would really like to expand our board more if I could get more Southeast Asian, someone from various other communities. We are ethnically diverse, African American, Hispanic, but no Asian representation, and younger people would be great. Then as far as staff goes, I don't have any staff openings right now, but I could always use an intern, and sometimes we can fund intern positions. The current person I have, who is the most recent hire, was supposed to be a Delta College intern, and we just missed the program. I mean, the day.
No.
So I ended up just hiring her and paying for her anyway. But now I can really only afford 2 staff, and we pay $20 or more an hour. We've been ahead of the whole minimum wage, but they only work 20 hours a week. So that's the deal. So that's another thing is trying to develop a robust enough budget to pay people better, to eventually include benefits, and to pay an executive director, because I am for free.
Well, let's see what we can do. If anyone interested, if you're interested in, being on this board, providing your input, really being involved in all the beautiful work of Tuleburg Press, reach out to Paula. And I kind of want to just now quickly talk about downtown. So what do you love about downtown Stockton, and why is it such a great place for the right place to be and Tuleburg Press to be kind of located?
Well, it has its definite pluses and minuses. I've been downtown almost all my adult working life, with several organizations that I either belong to or companies that I work for, most notably writing for the Record. And so I have never had a problem with downtown. And I live close to downtown. I live in the over by the arena. And I love walking, being able to walk both to the Miracle Mile and to downtown, or to the Weber Point area for things. So it's just so convenient. But I, like a lot of older Stocktonians, just am appalled at our inability to revive downtown after the flight north. But that took a long time too. It started in the 60s and it continued for several decades, and we have a lot to reverse. We thought that Weber Point would do it, but until we get the channel developed, there's a lot of people that make a lot of promises and then don't deliver. But those of us who stick it out downtown, I think it's just really important to preserve, to stake make our claim and stay there. I have board members and various people that complain about coming downtown about the parking. So we try to make, we do things in the evening and on weekends where parking is free. But it was important for us to be downtown because there's schools down there. And we have had an after school program. It's on hiatus right now because of funding. But working with Collegiate, working with Team Charter, working with Weber and with Spanos, because they're all walkable, to do school field trips and workshops. That's really why I wanted to be downtown. And just because the architecture is unbeatable,
Yeah.
I just feel like you can't talk about improving downtown unless you're doing things to improve downtown. So I'm one of the stakeholders in downtown.
You planted a stake. You're doing your part, trying to bring people down here. That's the goal for all of us. What we're trying to do. We want to activate, this area. It's such a beautiful downtown. So since you are here so often, do you have any favorite lunch spots that you want to give a shout out to?
If I didn't include Yasuyani, I'd be a fool. I mean, they're right across the street and I am so busy. I don't get too far away. I love the downtowner, and it's really sad that we lost the downtowner. But I'm just going to stick with that right there. And then the Bagel Cafe on the corner, they make the best croissants. They're just as good as European croissants. So anyway, that's about as far as I go. I don't get too far away from my desk.
Yeah, you're keeping it close to home. Yeah, the Bagel Cafe has such good sandwiches. I love their croissant sandwiches. Oh my goodness, love it. And Yasiani is fabulous too. So
and I just have for coffee, you've got your choice. You've got
so
Trail,
many.
You've got Impresso, you've got Cafe del Arte. I mean, the coffee scene is great downtown.
Yeah, you can't beat it. I totally 100% agree with you. So I just have a couple more questions, and this is, what do you most enjoy about working for Tuleburg? Like, what do you love about this work? Because it's a lot, you're taking on a lot, but it's also got to be very rewarding. So what do you enjoy about it?
Well, I think it's a lot like teaching. Basically, I, run my own show. I mean, I do have a board and I do have to answer to the public, but basically I get up every day and manifest what has to be done and trying to find the right team that will support me and that I can support and mentor. That's gratifying. I mean, working with the staff that I have there in their 20s, it's just like being at Delta and teaching. There's very much similar activities, and it's all about reading and writing. I mean, there's a huge match between Delta and Tuleburg, and I think Tuleburg feeds into Delta. I mean, there's just a good relationship. But it is just, it's put up or shut up. I mean, do if you're gonna, be, that old saying, you're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution, and being able to actually have a vision and then make it happen. I mean, it's very rewarding. I mean, sometimes I make mistakes and screw up, but there's nobody to beat me up except me. I just keep going. You get some grants, you lose some grants, you get some employees, you lose some employees, but you can't let any of that. It's just like any player. You get up to the free throw line, and sometimes you make it and sometimes you don't, but you make it more than you don't, so.
It's rewarding just seeing it coming to life and doing your best and trying, just working every day, striving towards it.
Right.
I love that.
Well, you don't make mistakes. I mean, if you don't try, you don't make mistakes, but I mean, that's the sign of trying. So.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just a step on the way. Just a step. So if you could provide one tip for anyone who's listening and they're an aspiring writer, what would that be?
Do the work.
Just do it.
You just do it. I mean, I'm sorry, Nike, but that's it. That was the best catchphrase ever made. Just do it. It is really about the time in the seat.
Just make it happen. Just, sit down, write.
And don't doubt yourself. And like Anne Lamott, the writer, says, you always have that little voice right here saying you're not good enough, or this isn't good enough, or edit it, or what's somebody going to think about this? Let that go. She says, take that voice like a mouse and drop it in a mason jar, and screw the lid on it, and just don't listen to it. If you're going to write. Anything can be edited. Anything can be published. It just might not be through Tuleburg.
Love it. Very
And
motivating.
some people like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. That's a classic piece of literature. That guy submitted that book 140 times and got rejected. This is a story. I hope it's true. I mean, I've heard this many times. And on the 141st time, he found a publisher. So, you know.
There could be an avenue for everyone, depending
Right.
on what your project is. Just don't get discouraged. I love it. Don't get discouraged. Okay, so if people have, like, they're very interested in Tuleburg Press, they have any questions about your manuscript submission process, or about publishing anything through Tuleburg Press, or about any of the workshops at the right place, or about how to get a copy of the poetry anthology, what should they do? How can they get in touch with you?
Tuleburgpress@gmail.com. That's our email. Tuleburgpress@gmail.com. We're on Facebook and Instagram. You know, we're always fielding questions from every platform. So we're easy to find.
Easy to find, right there. And I would just want to say thank you, Paula, for answering my questions. It's been very interesting kind of chatting with you, learning more about the process of publishing, learning more about the work of Tuleburg Press in the right place. And I really admire what you're doing. It's really beautiful. Like, it's awesome.
Thank you very much for having me. I can't believe we got through all those questions too. The best prepared questions I think I've ever had. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Well, thank you. And I just want to remind everyone listening that this video has been streaming live. It looks like we had an issue streaming live to Facebook, but we have been streaming live to YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And we have where we are at downtown Stockton. We have also been streaming live to Twitter, where we are, or Twitter, which is now X, where we are at downtown STKN. So if you didn't catch all of this video, you can definitely check it out on our YouTube channel, where it's going to be there. And at this point, this is where I usually look and see if there are any audience questions. So you can take a breather, Paula. Thanks for making it through all of mine. Let's see if there are any audience questions. And okay, at the moment, there aren't any. So if we don't get any questions before we end the live stream, then I will just say, maybe you couldn't comment because we weren't live on Facebook, but if you leave a comment anyway on the video post, you can still be entered in a chance to win the copy of Center of Attention, the poetry anthology from Tuleburg Press. So maybe if we don't get any live comments, we will draw from post comments. So make sure to still ask a question or just make a comment there, and we'll be sure to announce the winners by the end of the day. So that will be fun. And yes, I see no questions at the moment. Okay, well, I would just like to say, again, a big thank you, Paula, for your time, for your work, for everything. And thank you, viewers who tuned in. I hope you learned something, and I hope you now are motivated to check out Tuleburg Press, to attend fully booked, and maybe submit a manuscript if you're so inclined. So thank you again, Paula, for your time and all the work that you do. Is there anything you'd like to say before we close out?
No, I've really appreciated the opportunity to spread the word. Thank you very much.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much again. And with that, I would just like to say, have a great day downtown. Thanks, everybody.